I wanted to create a video to document some odd behavior that I'm seeing with my Olympus OMD E-M1 Mark II. And the behavior that I'm seeing is depending on what setting I have the frame rate option set to in the menus. Although the final image comes out properly exposed, what's actually being reported out in the EVF and on the LCD and in the histogram may indicate otherwise. And so we can see that if I go into the firmware settings, we can see that the body is on 2.0 and the lens, which is an Olympus 12-100 Pro, is on 1.3. Then if we jump up to COG and we go to the D2 menu, we can see that for live view boost, for the manual shooting and the others options, I have that set to off. And that's important because if we look at what that means, that's saying that the brightness reflects the exposure settings and that the brightness that's seen is the same in that of the final image. And that's what we would expect with a mirrorless camera or when you're shooting in live view. We can see that the frame rate is set to normal. And so if we jump out and we take a look at the scene here, we can see that the scene is actually pretty well exposed. Looking at the histogram, we have some shadows and some highlights, and then the midground is pretty well exposed as well. And so if we go and we take this image with the electronic shutter, and we look at what is being read out on live view, and then we compare that to the image that was just taken, we can see that it's pretty much exactly what we would expect to see. But where this gets a little different is if I jump into the menu and I change the frame rate to high and we jump out, you can now see how much darker the image is, and you can definitely see this in how the histogram has shifted. So whereas before we had 3 peaks, we had basically right on the shadows, in the midground, and then also in the highlights, well, now we can see that the image is pretty well underexposed. However, if I go and I take this image and then we view it in playback, this is the live view that we're getting with frame rate set to high, but that's the image that we just took. And we can see that it's quite different, and we see this if we look at the histogram that's reported out. So we can see that the histogram of the image itself is what we saw whenever we had the frame rate set to normal, where we had the 3 peaks on the histogram. However, that's not what's being reported out in the histogram for live view with the frame rate set to high. Now, I don't know if this is a new issue since firmware 2.0 or if this has always been this way and I just haven't noticed it before, but I'm curious to see if anybody else has noticed this issue whenever they're using the different frame rate settings for their E-M1 Mark II.